Since the very beginning of Russia's ruthless invasion of Ukraine, the country's president Volodymyr Zelensky has been practically begging the Western allies to deliver tanks to aid Ukraine's defense. 1% of all your tanks, 1%, was all Zelensky asked for, while speaking at the extraordinary summit of NATO heads of state and government in Brussels, Belgium, on March 24, 2022. And yet almost a year would pass before the first tanks began to arrive in Ukraine. Plus, the total number of delivered vehicles can't even come close to the 1% Zelensky asked for, which would amount to roughly 1,100 tanks in 2024. But despite delays, obstacles and limitations, Ukraine has put the long-awaited Western-made tanks to incredible use, demonstrating both the technological prowess and innovative tactics of the Ukrainian forces. With this in mind, let's explore what tanks Ukraine received from its Western allies, which of them are still operational, and how they've been deployed on the battlefield. A real punching fist of democracy. That's how Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's head of the office, described the arrival of the first Western-made tanks to Ukraine in 2023. But what's so special about these tanks? Why did Ukraine want them so much? After all, Ukraine had around 900 tanks at the beginning of the invasion. It's not like the country lacked armored vehicles altogether. These tanks even managed to score some remarkable victories in the early days of the invasion. Take the siege of Chernihiv as an example. During this battle, Ukraine's best tank brigade managed to successfully protect the city of Chernihiv, despite being heavily outnumbered and outgunned by the Russian 41st Combined Arms Army with its 20,000 troops and hundreds of T-72 tanks. So why is there an urgent need for tanks from the West? Well, it's simple really. Western-made tanks are technologically superior to the Soviet-made units Ukraine uses in several key aspects. But besides needing better tanks, Ukraine also needed more tanks if it were to continue its valiant defense against Russian aggression. If it had been up to Zelensky, the more part would have been between 300 and 500 tanks, a significantly lower number compared to the initial 1% he requested. Although the number of tanks Ukraine eventually received is lower than both requests, each additional tank has made an impact on the battlefield. A quick look at these tanks and their specifications reveals why. Let's start with the most common Western-made tank in the Ukrainian military. The Kampfpanzer Leopard 1 is the main battle tank designed by Porsche and originally manufactured in West Germany. When the Leopard 1 was introduced in the late 1950s, it represented a significant leap in tank technology, thanks to its emphasis on effective mobility, speed, and firepower rather than heavy armor protection. The Leopard 1 could travel at a speed of up to 40 miles per hour, which few tanks of the era could match. The tank also featured impressive armament, with the mighty 105mm Royal Ordnance L7A3 rifled gun as the primary weapon, paired with advanced fire control systems that enhanced its accuracy and target acquisition capabilities. As for armor, the Leopard 1 was protected by the now old-fashioned 70mm rolled homogeneous armor, which provided basic protection against small arms fire and shell splinters, but wasn't designed to withstand direct hits from heavy anti-tank weapons. That's why some experts consider the Leopard 1 the least protected tank in the war in Ukraine, often requiring add-on armor. Luckily, the Ukrainian forces know how to upgrade a tank perfectly, a precious skill given how large their fleet of Leopard 1 tanks is. Even by today's standards, the Leopard 1 remains notable for its balanced design and operational versatility, making it a highly respected platform in the military world. That's good news for Ukraine, which has received anywhere between 100 and 270 of these tanks since 2023. Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands are the top donors among Ukraine's NATO allies, with Germany alone pledging 88 units in February 2023. The reason why there's such a huge gap between the top and bottom estimates lies in the fact that the pledges are often highly publicized by the donors, while the actual deliveries are often kept under wraps in order to maintain operational security and avoid provoking further tensions or reactions from Russia. Now, as to how many Leopard 1 tanks are still operational in Ukraine, the estimates also vary greatly. Some reports mention dozens of Leopards that have been damaged, destroyed, or abandoned in Ukraine. Others speculate that Ukraine is almost out of these tanks altogether. But as far as concrete proof goes, we only know of one Leopard tank that's been hit by Russian artillery shells in Kupiansk and subsequently abandoned by its crew from the 44th Ukrainian Mechanized Infantry Brigade. Though we don't know the exact number of Leopard 1 tanks Ukraine has received and lost, we do know which variants the country operated. The most notable variant is the Leopard 1A5 model, an upgraded version of the standard Leopard 1 tank, featuring improvements to its fire control systems, engine performance, and additional armor protection. This variant also features enhanced night vision capabilities, making it effective in low-light conditions, which is crucial for operations during dusk or nighttime. The rest of the Leopard variants used in Ukraine are primarily modified and derivative vehicles, which consist of specialized configurations for different operational needs. The Ukrainian forces have also used the Berger-Panzer II armored recovery vehicle for recovering and repairing damaged or disabled tanks and the other vehicles on the battlefield, the Pioneer Panzer II Dachs engineer tank for battlefield engineering tasks such as clearing obstacles, constructing defensive positions, and repairing infrastructure, the Biber armored vehicle launched bridge to provide mobile bridging capabilities for gaps up to 65 feet wide, the Wysent-1MC multifunctional tracked armored platform for a variety of engineering and logistics tasks, with mine clearing being the #1 priority, the Norwegian-made NM189 armored engineer vehicle for combat engineering tasks that are crucial for operational success on the battlefield. The successor of the Leopard 1, the appropriately named Leopard 2, has also made its way into the Ukrainian military. As you can probably guess, the Leopard 2 represents a significant upgrade over the Leopard 1. The Leopard 2 was initially developed in West Germany during the 1960s as part of the MBT-70, a joint American-West German project aimed at creating a new generation of main battle tanks. Unfortunately, this project was doomed from the start, owing to poor communication and coordination between the participants, as well as different requirements from the US Army and German Bundeswehr. Though Germany withdrew from the project in 1969, it used the knowledge and technological advancements gained from the MBT-70 project to eventually develop the Leopard 2 tank independently. Interestingly, the US did the same, redirecting the funds and technology to build a tank many experts consider the best main battle tank in the world and which has been deployed in Ukraine. We'll let you speculate on which technological marvel that is for a while. For now, let's describe the specs of the only slightly less impressive Leopard 2. The Leopard 2 is known for its superior combination of firepower, mobility, and protection, making it one of the most effective main battle tanks in the world and, naturally, the war in Ukraine. In the firepower department, the Leopard 2 boasts a 120mm Rheinmetall L55 smoothbore gun, which provides exceptional accuracy. This gun is also capable of firing a variety of ammunition types, including armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding Sabot AFPF SDS rounds and high-explosive anti-tank HEAT rounds. Precise targeting and rapid firing of these advanced armaments are possible even on the move, as the tank also features sophisticated fire control systems and thermal imaging. In terms of mobility, the Leopard can reach a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour on roads while maintaining agility on various terrains. The speed is certainly an impressive feat, given that the Leopard 2 is quite heavy, weighing roughly 70 tons. Of course, this feat wouldn't be possible without the mighty 1,500 horsepower MTU MB 873 KA501 diesel engine, a significant upgrade from its predecessor. Another substantial upgrade that differentiates the Leopard 2 from the Leopard 1 is undoubtedly armor. The Leopard 2 features advanced composite armor, which provides robust protection against a wide range of threats, including 125mm penetrator ammunition fired from a mile away. The tank is also equipped with advanced defensive systems, including smoke grenade launchers and infrared jammers, which help counter enemy targeting and improve survivability on the battlefield. Reportedly, there are over 2,000 of these highly advanced Leopards in European and Canadian arsenals, with a minimal price tag of around $6 million each. Out of these 2,000 units, Ukraine has received well over the 1% Zelensky mentioned at the beginning of the invasion, with upwards of 130 Leopard 2s reaching Ukraine. Since these tanks are already stationed throughout Europe, they are much easier and quicker to deliver. So far, these deliveries generally came from all over Europe, including 14 units from Poland, 8 units from Norway, 3 units from Portugal, 18 units from Germany, all in March 2023. As far as how many of these tanks were incapacitated in action, the Dutch open-source intelligence group Oryx puts this number at 32. Out of these 32 units, 16 were complete losses, 8 were damaged, and 8 were damaged and abandoned. The damaged tanks are being repaired at Polish and German depots and are expected to return to the front line. When reporting losses, we've tallied the two Leopard 2 variants together, the Leopard 2A4 and the Leopard 2A6. However, the 2A4 model undoubtedly suffered greater losses, which makes sense when you consider that the 2A6 model features some of the best armor protection of the Leopard series. Besides these two variants, Ukrainian forces have also employed the Buffalo 3 armored recovery vehicle on the standard Leopard 2 chassis for battlefield operations and the Leopard 2R mine-clearing variant, initially developed for the Finnish army. But this is not where the Leopard 2 variant stops. Ukraine has also received several Stridsvagn 122 Swedish main battle tanks, which are essentially heavily modified Leopard 2A5s. What distinguishes the Stridsvagn 122 from the Leopard 2A5 on the outside is the French Galix smoke grenade launchers, different storage bins, and reinforced and thicker crew hatches. As for the inner workings of the Stridsvagn 122, the tank features significant upgrades in command, control, and fire control systems. The completely new fire control system has improved the speed and accuracy of target detection and identification, as well as firing, making the Stridsvagn 122 a sniper among tanks. This tank was specifically modified to operate in a wide variety of Swedish environments, including wooded and urban areas. These modifications also make the Stridsvagn 122 suitable for the Ukrainian forces in the field, come deep snow or muddy ground. Out of 10 Stridsvagn 122s Ukraine initially received in September 2023, 7 have been destroyed, damaged, or abandoned while braving the harsh conditions in Ukraine. Only one unit was completely destroyed, some 3 months in, though it isn't exactly clear how based on the available images. Another one was damaged in a recoverable position, while the remaining 5 were damaged and abandoned. With this, we are finally done with the Leopard family among the Western-made tanks in Ukraine, taking us to the next of the Western tanks, a tank-busting tank known as the British Challenger 2. The Challenger 2 main battle tank entered operational service with the British Army in 1994 and has since been used in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Iraq. Simply put, the Challenger 2 is designed to destroy other tanks. To achieve this 70-ton mammoth of a tank features an L30A1 120mm rifled gun with 47 rounds as the primary armament and 2 7.62mm guns as secondary armament. The first is a coaxial L94A1 chain gun mounted alongside the main gun and designed for close-range defense, while the second is a pintle-mounted L37A2 machine gun located on the commander's cupola, providing additional firepower for anti-infantry roles and perimeter defense. This robust armament setup ensures that the Challenger 2 is well equipped to engage and neutralize a wide range of threats in combat situations, so much so that it even holds the record for the longest-range tank-on-tank kill shot in military history, achieved in 1991 during the Gulf War when a Challenger 1 took out an Iraqi tank located 3 miles away. Besides firepower, this tank prioritizes protection, boasting Dorchester composite armor, whose specs are largely confidential. As Hamish de Breton Gordon, a former commanding officer in the British Army's Royal Tank Regiment, puts it, Challenger 2 is very well protected. It could take several hits from a T-72 and the crew would survive. This superb protection is the reason why only 2 Challenger 2s have been lost so far in the tank's decades-long history, one due to friendly fire in Iraq in 2003 and one in Ukraine. Naturally, the one lost in Ukraine was a pretty big deal, since this was the first time an actual enemy took out a Challenger 2. Before this, the Challenger 2 was hailed as a virtually invincible tank. So how did the Russian forces manage to pull off this historic feat? Well, we aren't exactly sure. According to Western sources, the tank was initially immobilized by a huge mine before being utterly destroyed by a Zara Lancet kamikaze drone, known for its precision and ability to target specific vulnerabilities in armored vehicles. However, according to the Russians, it was artillery. The first wave immobilized the tank and caused a fire, while the second, an all-out kind of artillery attack, crushed any hope this tank would ever run again. Though we aren't sure what the truth is, the fact remains that this tank is gone, leaving Ukraine with 13 more units previously delivered by the UK in March 2023. Which now brings us to the tank we hinted at earlier, one many experts consider the best main battle tank in the world, the US-made M1 Abrams. The famed M1 Abrams tank has been central to the US Army's armored capabilities since its debut in 1980. The US specifically redirected funds and technology from the MBT-70 to develop the M1 Abrams. In its rich 4-decade history, the tank has been used in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and exported to the likes of Australia, Egypt, Poland, and Saudi Arabia. The M1 Abrams is a full-track, low-profile land combat assault vehicle, which the US Army describes in 6 words: lethal firepower, unparalleled survivability, audacious maneuverability. Let's break each of these descriptors down. In terms of firepower, the M1A1 variant fighting in Ukraine boasts a 120mm L44 M256 smoothbore gun with 40 rounds of depleted uranium shells, also known as silver bullets, which have been described as the most lethal to any armor. As for the survivability aspect, the M1A1 variant's armor is reinforced with advanced composite materials and explosive reactive armor, ERA, providing unmatched protection against both kinetic and explosive threats on the battlefield. This combination ensures that the M1 Abrams can withstand direct hits from a variety of anti-tank weapons, including rockets and shells, often even at close range. The M1 Abrams is also the first tank to provide optical and thermal sights to both the commander and the gunner, allowing them to simultaneously track separate targets. Pair this so-called hunter-killer capability with a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour and a powerful 1,500 horsepower Honeywell AGT 1500 multi-fuel turbine engine, and the M1 Abrams becomes a formidable force in maneuver warfare, capable of swiftly outflanking and engaging enemy forces across diverse terrains with unmatched agility and precision. This technological beast finally reached Ukraine in September 2023 after months of indecision. A total of 31 M1 Abrams arrived from the US, 21 of which have survived so far. Out of the 10 compromised tanks, only 3 were total losses. 1 was damaged in a recoverable position and 6 were damaged and abandoned. If you're wondering how we could possibly know the exact breakdown of the incapacitated tanks, that's because it's the first so-called smartphone war, aka the first war where seemingly every combatant has a smartphone ready to promptly snap a photo and share it online. This accessibility to technology has contributed to a more transparent understanding of battlefield events. That's how we know that Ukraine has lost a total of 857 tanks so far, 585 of which were destroyed, 72 damaged, 66 abandoned, and 134 captured. But what exactly happened to the western portions of these losses? In other words, how has Ukraine used these tanks so far, and which of these uses resulted in the heaviest losses? One of the key roles of the Western-made tanks in Ukraine, and the first time these tanks were actually deployed, was the 2023 summer counteroffensive. One of the reasons why this push wasn't a spring offensive was the fact that the Western tanks still hadn't arrived. Once they did, however, they played an important role in the advancements of the Ukrainian forces in the area of Orikhiv in June 2023. The summer counteroffensive is also when a large number of the Leopard 2 tanks were lost in a relatively short period due to a dense network of Russian fortifications, minefields, and anti-tank ditches. The members of one of the Leopard tank crews would later explain in an interview that they were simply not prepared for the sheer size of the Russian minefields. The ones they practiced for in Germany were around 300 by 650 feet in size, while the actual Russian minefields could be measured in hectares, with 1 hectare equal to almost 12,000 square yards. For this reason, soldiers often had to rely on their older Soviet-era vehicles, such as the T-64 tank, which is fitted with rollers to deliberately set off mines. In this method, the tank clears the path, and it can usually withstand as many as 4 explosions. However, the T-64 tanks didn't have much luck either, as the Russian forces stacked mines on top of each other, thus causing significant damage to the vehicles straight away. From this outcome, one thing became abundantly clear. The tanks used for the counteroffensives lacked the necessary support to get through the Russian multi-layered anti-tank defense. In other words, the loss of the Western-made tanks had nothing to do with their performance, but everything to do with their poor deployment. Russian multi-layered anti-tank systems that halted the Western-made tanks in the 2023 summer counteroffensive are also the reason why these tanks haven't been used in tank-on-tank engagement. Simply put, the Western tanks operated by Ukrainian forces couldn't get past the Russian minefields, and those that did were typically met with artillery and anti-tank missiles. This means that Ukraine hasn't had much use for the tanks designed to be tank killers, such as the M1 Abrams and Challenger 2, in their primary roles. However, just because tank-on-tank warfare has been limited in the war in Ukraine, it doesn't mean Ukrainian forces haven't found a way to effectively utilize these so-called heavy tracked tanks. So the Challenger 2 has been wreaking havoc on Russian artillery firing positions, bunkers, and light armored vehicles. The Ukrainian soldiers in these tanks have praised their accuracy, which have allowed them to strike concrete enemy dugouts and fire at targets around 1.7 miles away. However, this British tank lacks the anti-personnel shells to defeat infantry troops, so the Stridsvagn 122 tanks are mostly the ones engaging the Russian troops on the front lines. But as important as the offensive roles of the Western-made tanks are, we can't forget about the defensive ones. So Western tanks are also used to repel Russian invaders, serving as long-range artillery rather than an attacking vehicle. Interestingly, in addition to the Leopard 2, the tank most frequently used for this purpose was the Polish PT-91 Twardie, a main battle tank we haven't mentioned in this video. But why? Because there's plenty of debate about how Western this tank truly is. You see, the PT-91 Twardie is essentially an advanced version of the Soviet-era T-72 tank. That's what makes it a bit of an outlier in discussions about Western tanks. Either way, the unique blend between the tried-and-true Soviet design principles and modern Western technology and upgrades creates a mighty tank. It's a tank that's done wonders for crew safety in Ukraine, according to Ukrainian soldiers. This exceptionally important defensive characteristic results from the use of the Polish ERAWA reactive armor. This armor consists of ceramic or metal plates sandwiching a layer of explosive. Upon impact, these plates explode, thus neutralizing the incoming projectiles and reducing their penetrative power by 50 to 70%. According to a Ukrainian soldier, if you compare it face-to-face with the Soviet T-72, the PT-91 Twardy has a much better chance of survival and victory in a duel. This superiority over Soviet-era designs is another crucial role of the Western-made tanks in Ukraine, both from a practical and psychological standpoint. In terms of their practical uses, the Western tanks have given Ukrainians an edge in fighting against the Russian forces. According to another Ukrainian soldier, there's a night-and-day difference between using the Soviet tanks and the Challenger 2, for instance. So much so that the Ukrainian soldiers have publicly thanked the UK for the honor of using the country's tanks. According to a video posted to Telegram, an instant messaging app commonly used for sharing updates and communications in conflict zones. Of course, the war in Ukraine wasn't the first event to prove just how superior the Western-made tanks are to the Soviet-era ones. The Gulf War was the first to dramatically highlight this disparity. A mere 100 hours were all it took to learn that the Soviet-made T-72 is not even in the same league as the Western-made M1 Abrams and Challenger 2. Take Operation Desert Storm as an example. During this operation, the Abrams and Challengers managed to destroy T-72s beyond the Soviet tank's main gun range, allowing Western forces to engage and eliminate enemy tanks unscathed. That's when the longest known tank-on-tank kill shot in history occurred, we mentioned earlier. But even when the tanks came closer, the T-72 still had nothing on its Western counterparts. Members of the US Army's 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, in approximately 36 M1A1 Abrams tanks, managed to defeat 2 Iraqi armored brigades in close combat without losing a single tank. The Iraqi brigades, on the other hand, lost as many as 160 of them. The intimidating reputation of these models brings us to the psychological use of Western-made tanks in the war. The mere fact that these advanced tanks are in the hands of Ukrainian forces serves as a significant morale booster for the troops. It instills confidence in their ability to confront and defeat any Russian unit. But more importantly, it also instills fear and doubts in the mind of Russian soldiers, undermining their morale and willingness to engage. As one Ukrainian soldier puts it, you're basically just scaring the Russians with the sound of the engine. Though to be fair, Russians have also found a way to strike back without directly engaging these fearsome tanks with personnel. Drones. Drones are actually the reason many military experts believe tanks have been made obsolete in modern warfare, at least until the technology and tactics catch up to counter them effectively. Drones are also the reason why Ukraine has moved the Abrams tanks from the front lines, as Russian hunter-killer drones managed to take out at least 5 of them. But even when the Western-made tanks aren't used in direct offensive or defensive operations, they still offer plenty of value to the Ukrainian armed forces. For instance, the Leopard 1 tanks have proven to be incredibly valuable outside active assault duties, such as providing crucial infantry support roles like transport and logistical operations. Their robust design and mobility allow them to navigate various terrains effectively, ensuring supplies and personnel can be transported safely and efficiently across the battlefield. But as helpful as Western-made tanks have been in Ukraine, there is a consensus that they aren't being used to their full potential. Besides the Russians' rock-solid anti-tank defenses, there are a few more reasons for this. Number 1, the tanks lack air support. As you probably know, no tank can truly be a game-changer in a conflict without adequate infantry and artillery support, and of course, air superiority. Unfortunately, the sky is where Ukraine has had the most issues, which is why Zelensky has been rather vocal about requesting the Western-made F-16 Fighting Falcon fighter jets. Number 2, there's a huge issue with tank maintenance and logistics. Prior to the invasion, Ukraine operated Soviet-era tanks. Now it's received multiple tank models coming from different sources, which creates a logistical nightmare in terms of spare parts, maintenance protocols, and training personnel. Speaking of training, that's reason number 3 for the challenges Ukraine faces. Transitioning from Soviet-era tanks to multiple new tank models requires comprehensive training programs for both maintenance crews and operators. Each tank variant has unique features, technologies, and operational procedures that Ukrainian personnel must master to ensure effective deployment on the battlefield. After all, it's the properly trained soldiers that win the fight, not the technology. All things considered, how do you see the role of Western-made tanks in Ukraine? Do you see these tanks as a major breakthrough or just another component in Ukraine's overall defensive strategy? Also, do you see Ukraine using Western-made tanks differently in the future? Share your thoughts, opinions, and theories in the comment section below. Now go and check out why Putin is covering his best tanks in junk, or click this other video instead.